for years that we need more air traffic controllers and more safety technology. The warnings have been clear, and in some cases, right here within this committee, and a bipartisan consensus on the need to upgrade the equipment and the need to train more air traffic controllers. In November 2023, we held a hearing on close calls. NTSB Chair Hamidi testified, citing staffing shortages, fatigue, distraction, deviation from FAA regulations, and a lack of runway safety technology. And she warned, and I quote, "The concerning uptick in such incidents is a clear warning sign that the U.S. aviation system is sharply strained. We cannot wait until a fatal accident forces action. We must act before there is a tragedy." End quote. Chairwoman, just sadly predictive of what's going to happen. And you said that in 2023. At the same hearing, the National Air Traffic Controller Association's president told us that staffing shortages were so bad that many air traffic controllers were working mandatory overtime, 6-day work weeks, and 10-hour days. He warned, and I quote, "Over the long term, this will continue to introduce unnecessary risk into the system," end quote. So we passed in a bipartisan way FAA reauthorization bill last year to help rebuild our aviation workforce and make critical investments in safety. The FAA is still implementing that new law, but clearly Congress has more work to do to shore up aviation safety in this great nation. In December of 2024, we held another hearing. The GAO told us that more than 75% of our aging air traffic control systems are unsustainable or potentially unsustainable. The deadly collision at DCA is not the only aviation safety incident so far this year. We've seen deadly crashes in Philadelphia and Alaska, a crash landing in Toronto that miraculously everyone survived, even after the aircraft flipped upside down. Earlier this month, we saw passengers standing on the wing of a 737 aircraft in Denver to escape a fire. And near misses keep happening. In February, a Southwest flight came within 200 feet of colliding with a FlexJet plane at Midway Airport. At such a dangerous time for aviation safety, when we need to bolster our workforce and invest in technology, the last thing we should be doing is making cuts to the FAA. Yet 2 weeks after the DCA crash, the Trump administration began firing hundreds of FAA employees. I say all of this because it is important context we need to keep in mind during today's hearing. We need to understand what happened at DCA, but we also need to understand how this fits into a much larger threat to aviation safety. According to the NTSB, DCA had many close calls in recent years between October 2021 and December 2024. As the chairman has said, there were more than 15,000 instances of commercial aircraft coming close to rotary wing aircraft. 85 of those had a vertical separation of less than 200 feet. And last year, there were also 2 high-profile runway close calls at DCA. NTSB's preliminary report raises several questions. Most notably, how did FAA allow a helicopter route to come within 75 feet of a runway approach? FAA has deconflicted the airspace, but DCA is not the only airport in the country where airplanes and helicopters share congested airspace. Several of us raised this at an earlier briefing, and thankfully, FAA is now evaluating 8 cities where this may also be an issue, including in Chicago. We also need to know more about what helicopter pilots knew about their altitude. Was their equipment working properly? Voice recordings showed the pilot and instructor pilot indicated different altitudes as they approached the Key Bridge, and NTSB determined that some of the altitude information on the helicopter's data recorder was invalid. There are also questions about ADSB. Why was the helicopter not transmitting ADSB out? Do commercial aircraft need to be equipped with ADSB in? How come so many helicopters are allowed exemptions from the ADSB out requirement at DCA? So I look forward to hearing from our witnesses, and I yield back, Chairman.
Ranking Member Duckworth, thank you very much for your opening statement. She almost called me the ranking member.
I did.
There's no reason to apologize. Senator Duckworth was the previous chairman of this subcommittee, and I had a great opportunity to work with her as the ranking member. And I would indicate certainly to Senator Duckworth, but to those in the audience, this is a subcommittee that will set partisanship aside, and we will continue to work closely together to find the answers that we're looking for today, and beyond finding the answers, making certain that changes are made to prevent this tragedy. We are joined by the chairman of the full committee, Senator Cruz, and I now appreciate his presence here and his leadership on this issue from the very beginning, and I now recognize him for his opening statement.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the ranking member as well. I want to thank each of the witnesses for being here today, and I want to extend a particular welcome to the family members of the 67 crash victims who are here today for this hearing. I've met with many of you since the crash, and each of you have my very deepest condolences for your unimaginable loss. The crash involving American Airlines Flight 5342 and the Army Blackhawk helicopter was preventable. It didn't have to happen. And I want you to know that I am committed to using the power of this committee to determine if any policy failures led to this crash and making certain that Congress acts to correct them. This accident marks the first time a commercial crash in the United States has led to mass fatalities in over 15 years. While America's national airspace system has kept Americans safe for decades, this critical juncture shows that more action must take place to enhance the safety of our system. The hearing today will examine the factors leading up to the mid-air collision 300 feet above the Potomac River. Whether the Army's practice of disabling ADSB out is a glaring safety concern. Whether the FAA missed warning signs with thousands of instances where helicopters and commercial aircraft at DCA came too close to colliding. Whether the communications between the air traffic controller and both of the pilots of the American Airlines flight and the Blackhawk helicopter was inadequate. The families of the American Airlines Flight 5342 victims deserve answers. Congress deserves answers. And the American flying public deserves answers to these important questions. The NTSB does terrific work. I'm grateful to Chairman Jennifer Homendy and her team for their thorough investigation of this accident. The preliminary report being discussed today is factual. It does not include analysis, nor does it include findings. It is just one step in what will be a lengthy and ongoing investigation. This committee will closely follow how that investigation proceeds and look forward to the NTSB's full findings. Some actions, however, cannot wait. Aviation safety is dependent on what is called the Swiss cheese model. Each layer of cheese represents a defense against an identified risk, building redundancy into the system to plug holes and prevent accidents. After decades of advancements, the U.S. aviation system has been held up worldwide as the gold standard of safety. The FAA's air traffic organization depends on thousands of talented air traffic controllers, hundreds of millions of dollars in annual investments to sustain technologies used to operate the air system, and billions more invested in technologies and facilities across the system. Even with these significant investments, the air traffic system is failing. Facilities, which are falling apart, are short-staffed, and projections show that the shortages will last for years. Over the weekend, the NOTAM system broke down for a third time in just 2 years. Congress has provided tens of millions of dollars in the past two years to modernize the NOTAM system. And it has broken down already twice this calendar year. President Trump and Secretary Duffy have pledged to take action to improve the air traffic control system. I plan to lead this committee in passing legislation to do the same. We must provide resources for the needed short, medium, and long-term improvements that chart the path to success and sustainment for the air traffic system. Earlier this week, I issued a call to aviation stakeholders for specific ideas to improve the air traffic system. I asked for concrete proposals, taking nothing off the table prematurely to make sure that whatever resources and authorities Congress provides to the administration will make a lasting difference. My proposal will complement the Trump administration's forthcoming plan. What the tragedy of Flight 5342 shows us is that it is never too early to act to improve aviation safety. I want to thank the families of the victims for taking your enormous grief and channeling it into energy, channeling it into advocacy, channeling it into standing up and speaking out for other families flying on other flights, fighting for them so they don't have to endure the grief and loss that each of you is enduring. It is my hope that we can spend the coming months in the wake of this tragedy working seriously to plug safety gaps and to ensure that an accident of this magnitude never happens again. Thank you.
Chairman Cruz, thank you for your opening remarks, your leadership today, and your leadership into the future. We now recognize the ranking member of the full committee, the senator from Washington State, Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Chairman Moran. Thank you, Ranking Member Duckworth. Thank you, Full Committee Chairman Cruz. We're here today to examine one of the most devastating accidents in U.S. history. With 67 lives lost on January 29th, we have a responsibility to not only understand what happened, but to fix it so that it never happens again. I want to recognize the families who are here with us today and express my condolences, but also my appreciation for the diligence that you now are demonstrating by being here today. Too much of aviation safety in the last several years have been left to the advocacies of families. We shouldn't have to rely on you. You should be able to mourn your losses. But we need you to continue to advocate for these important policies. I welcome NTSB Chair Jennifer Hamady, FAA Acting Administrator Chris Richelieu, and Brigadier General Matt Bramman, and who is the Director of Army Aviation. You're here to provide us an update on this collision and why a Blackhawk helicopter on a training flight collided with this American Airlines flight. As we seek answers, the NTSB's preliminary report has alarming facts. First, in the 3-year period leading up to the collision, commercial airplane and helicopters got within 400 feet of each other on 15,214 occasions, within 200 feet on 85 occasions. FAA's air traffic managers approve helicopter route charts annually, so that if the data raised questions about the safety of these routes, the ball clearly falls into the FAA's court as to whether to act on this data or make changes where the helicopters can fly in DCA. A helicopter at 200 feet would only have 75 vertical feet separation from an airplane approaching on runway 33. These findings reveal a very systemic issue that demand answers from our witnesses today. Acting Administrator Richelieu, I want to know, why did the FAA not act? Why did the FAA not act on 15,000 reports of dangerous proximity? How were these helicopter routes allowed to remain when alarm bells were literally going off in the towers? This lack of oversight must change. The Army Blackhawk helicopter was not transmitting what is known as ADSB out signal, although we don't know why. What we do know is that the military told our colleagues, House Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton in 2023, that the military operates 100% of its flights in the National Capital Region without this safety technology, 100% of the time. On March 7th, I wrote Secretary Hegseth about this issue for a response, asking to respond by March 21st. I've still heard nothing back. I do not like this silence. It's deafening. General Bramman, I have questions about these policies, especially given that the FAA's 2019 rule stating that the deactivation of the ADSB out technology pursuant to an exemption was not to be routine. Well, the Holmes letter says that not only was it far from routine, 100% of the time operated with this exemption. Acting Administrator Richelieu, your agency gave government airspace users a loophole. What we want to know now is why this was allowed to continue if we have this data and information. And are there any other agencies that are acting with ADSB out that we haven't addressed yet? The FAA rule needs to change. Chair Hamady, I'll be asking you about ADSB requirements. In 2010, the FAA said that it was premature to require this kind of equipment on operators. Yet, at the same time the FAA made that decision, just 2 years earlier, you wrote a letter saying, disagreeing with them, but saying that the conclusion, stating the, quote, the equipage of aircraft with ADBS out in capacity will provide for an immediate, substantial contribution to safety, especially during operations in and around airports. Why did we not listen? 15 years later, commercial aircraft are still not operating with this. If American Airlines regional jet had been equipped with this ADBS it would have been able to receive the Blackhawk's transmission, giving it a better intelligence on positioning. Tim Lilly, the father of the pilot from the commercial craft, who he himself is also Blackhawk helicopter pilot, and his wife, Sherry, spent many years working at Gulfstream. They know a thing or two about aviation. They gave me a list of actions they hope Congress can take to improve safety. Mr. Chairman, we all need to work together on this critical safety legislation. Legislation to close the ADSB out loophole, require more commercial jets to have ADSB in capacity when operating near our nation's busiest airports, and have stronger information sharing between our military and civilian authorities. This isn't just about policy, it is about saving lives. To my colleagues, I hope that we can work together in a bipartisan fashion, since the FAA Reauthorization Act did require next-gen completion by 2025. We also directed the FAA to develop a plan for accelerating airline equipage with next-gen technologies, and authorized $17 billion through 2028 to modernize and replace the FAA ATC systems and infrastructure. So I do want to say, I do not believe in cutting the services, the benefits, or the training of our air traffic controllers. We need them, and we need them to do their job. I supported Senator Cruz's efforts to continue to advance more training centers to get more air traffic controllers trained. But now we need to learn this painful lesson. We need to make sure that we are preventing future accidents from happening. We must be unwavering in this effort. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Ranking Member Cantwell, thank you for your opening statement. I'll now introduce our panelists who are here to testify. Our first witness is Jennifer, I'm sorry, I should put a title before you. Our first witness is Chairman Jennifer Hamady of the National Transportation Safety Board. The NTSB is an independent federal agency that investigates every civil aviation accident in the United States and significant events in other modes of transportation such as rail, transit, roadway, and pipeline. She has served as the chairwoman since 2021 and is a member of the NTSB board since 2018. Our second witness is Mr. Chris Rochelot, acting administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration. Mr. Rochelot has served at the FAA for more than 20 years in multiple roles, including as Deputy Associate Administrator for Aviation Safety. And our third witness is Brigadier General Matthew Brahman, Director of Army Aviation for the headquarters of the Department of the Army. Throughout his service, General Brahman has deployed over 36 months supporting overseas contingency operations. And I thank you, General, for your service. I now recognize Chairman Jennifer Hamady to deliver her opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Moran, Ranking Member Duckworth, Chairman Cruz, Ranking Member Cantwell, and members of the subcommittee for the opportunity to provide you with an update on our investigation of the mid-air collision that occurred over the Potomac River near Reagan National Airport on January 29th. The NTSB knows tragedy all too well. We experience it every day, which is why we fight so hard for safety. Yesterday, we remembered the 6 lives lost during the collapse of the Key Bridge in Baltimore a year ago. Today, we once again mourn the 67 lives lost at DCA, the 7 in Philadelphia, 10 in Nome, Alaska. We often talk about safety in terms of numbers. Did accidents, fatalities go up or down? It's important that we remember today that those who died at DCA and in other accidents we investigate aren't numbers. As you said, these are mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, wives, husbands, cousins, best friends who won't be there with their loved ones for Easter egg hunts, Passover Seders, the end of Ramadan, Mother's Day, Father's Day, graduation, all of life's celebrations. Their families and friends, whether in person or online, are here today. I can only imagine what they're going through, and I want to take a moment to again express our deepest sympathies to each of them. Please know that we keep you in our hearts as we diligently work to determine how this tragedy happened so no one experiences the deeply significant loss you must feel today. NTSB was on scene that night within an hour of the collision, and we remained there for over a month. Work continues to this day, including diving operations to recover personal effects and any remaining portions of the wreckage. On March 11th, we released our preliminary report, which contains only factual information that we've gathered in the first few weeks, all of which can change throughout the course of the investigation. It doesn't include analysis or findings, nor does it determine probable cause. Those will be in our final report. But we don't wait for a final report to take action if we uncover critical safety issues that require immediate attention, which is why, in conjunction with the release of our preliminary report, we also issued 2 urgent safety recommendations to the FAA. In both reports, we cited FAA surveillance data that showed between October 2021 and December 2024, there were over 15,000 close proximity events between commercial aircraft and helicopters at DCA. In reviewing that and other data, including airport operations and established helicopter routes, we determined that the separation distances between helicopter traffic operating on Route 4 and aircraft using runways 15 and 33 are insufficient and pose an intolerable risk to aviation safety. As a result, we recommended that the FAA prohibit operations on helicopter Route 4 between Haines Point and Wilson Bridge when those runways are being used for departures and arrivals. We also recommended that the FAA designate an alternative helicopter route that can be used to facilitate travel between Haines Point and the Wilson Bridge when that segment of Route 4 is closed. I want to commend Secretary Duffy for his swift acceptance of our recommendations. The Secretary and the Acting Administrator and the General have been tremendous partners throughout the course of this investigation, and I want to thank them for their commitment to safety. I know we're all searching for answers, the right safety solutions, but the NTSB is the gold standard for accident investigations for a reason. We are thorough and we're fact-based. We leave no stone unturned, and we let the evidence guide us. Investigations take time. We have a lot of work to do in this investigation, from interviews to analyses of large volumes of documents and data to review, to air carrier operations that we have to review, helicopter operations, air traffic control, human performance, helicopter airworthiness, flight recorders, and more. In total, we have about 40 NTSB experts leading this investigation in collaboration with the parties and others, and we're aiming to complete this investigation within 1 year, barring, of course, any unforeseen circumstances. Now, I want to close by thanking you for your steadfast support of the NTSB, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Chairwoman. We now recognize the Acting Administrator Rocheleau of the FAA for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Moran, Ranking Member Duckworth, Chairman Cruz, and Ranking Member Cantwell, as well as members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today to discuss the NTSB's preliminary report on the mid-air collision of PSA Airlines 5342 and the US Army Blackhawk helicopter that occurred in January near Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, or DCA. I would like to begin by offering my sincere sympathies to the families and loved ones of those who perished in recent aviation accidents, particularly the accident near DCA. The FAA continues to support the ongoing NTSB investigations. Our work with the NTSB will help us understand the factors that contributed to these accidents, and we will use the data to inform future FAA actions. Aviation safety is the FAA's #1 priority. Let me repeat that. Aviation safety is the FAA's #1 priority. While flying remains the safest mode of transportation, aviation safety is not static. There's always room for improvement. The professionals at the FAA take their jobs very seriously and strive to ensure safety every day. But the fact of the matter is, we have to do better. We have to identify trends. We have to get smarter on how we use data. And when we put corrective actions in place, we must implement them with diligence. I want to thank Chair Hamady and the entire NTSB team for their dedication in their ongoing investigation. Earlier this month, the NTSB issued an initial report and 2 urgent safety recommendations. The recommendations align with the actions the FAA took under Secretary Duffy's leadership immediately following the accident to restrict helicopter operations around DCA, eliminating mixed helicopter and fixed-wing traffic, and carefully developing alternative routes. Following the NTSB recommendations, the FAA took action to make these restrictions permanent. When essential helicopter operations such as life-saving medical, active law enforcement, active air defense, or presidential transport must operate in the flight-restricted airspace, fixed-wing aircraft are not allowed in that airspace. We're also continuing to analyze other airports that have both established helicopter routes and nearby airplane traffic. The FAA is also carefully reviewing offshore helicopter operations. As part of this analysis, we're using machine learning and language modeling to scan incident reports and explore multiple data sources to find themes and areas of concern. We will take immediate action if needed to mitigate any identified safety risks. Additionally, I will establish a safety risk management panel and engage with aviation stakeholders to identify additional hazard areas involving helicopter and fixed-wing interactions. And all aircraft operating in DCA Class B airspace will be required to broadcast their position and identification using ADSB out, with very limited exceptions. We're bolstering aviation safety in other ways too. Air traffic control staffing is a top priority as air traffic controllers play a critical role in keeping the American people safe. Right now, we have over 10,750 controllers on the job, with over 3,000 in training. We intend to hire another 2,000 controllers this year. We have streamlined the hiring process and incentivized hiring with a 30% increase in the salary of those who qualify to attend the FAA's academy. And we're already seeing positive results from these improvements. During the hiring surge that closed last week, we received over 10,000 applications, and more than 8,000 of those were referred to testing. We also continue to maintain rigorous oversight of Boeing to ensure the safety and compliance of its aircraft designs and operations. This oversight extends to ongoing monitoring of Boeing manufacturing practices, maintenance procedures, and software updates. We're working closely with Boeing to address any safety concerns and to ensure that all required modifications and improvements are made to meet the highest safety standards. We have a strong foundation at the FAA, and we're going to make our agency even stronger. We are refocusing our energy and directing all of our resources to safety, and will continue to recruit, train, and retain the best and brightest for the FAA team. I thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I also thank President Trump and Secretary Duffy for putting their faith in me to lead the FAA during this time. The work we do at the FAA isn't easy, but it's vitally important to the American people, and I'm proud to once again be part of the FAA team. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, sir. Recognize Brigadier General Matthew Brayman for his testimony.
Thank you, Chairman Moran, Ranking Member Duckworth, Chairman Cruz, and Ranking Member Cantwell, and distinguished members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to come here before you today to speak about the mid-air collision that occurred between an Army Blackhawk helicopter with the call sign PAT-25 and American Airlines Flight 5342. First and foremost, on behalf of Army senior leaders and all of our soldiers, I want to pass my continued condolences to all those that are affected by this tragedy. I want to thank the professional work of our first responders and the federal, state, and local agencies that responded within minutes to the crash site and aided in the recovery. I want to thank Chairman Hamidi and the NTSB for conducting a thorough investigation, facilitating a close and transparent relationship with the Army as we conduct our parallel investigations. The NTSB remains lead in the investigation, so I can't offer facts and recommendations at this time, but I can offer an Army perspective on the preliminary report and provide clarifying information on Army helicopter operations, and certainly can do that here in the Washington, D.C. area. For context, PAT-25's unit, the 12th Aviation Battalion, falls under the Army Aviation Brigade, or referred to as the TAB. And that unit has the mission to provide continuous, responsive aviation support to senior military and government leaders to enable continuity of government operations and defense support to civil authorities. The TAB is one of dozens of organizations, both civilian and military, that operates helicopters in the DC area. Our aircraft continue to meet all requirements to operate in the national airspace, in Class B airspace, and the helicopter routes in Washington, D.C., and they operate under positive control of flight services when within 30 nautical miles of DCA. PAT-25 was operating out of Davidson Army Airfield at Fort Belvoir. The crew of 3 were fully qualified to fly in the local area. The pilot in command, CW2 Andrew Eads, was an instructor pilot. The co-pilot, Captain Rebecca Lobach, was a qualified pilot in command as well. And the crew chief, Staff Sergeant Ryan O'Hara, was a standardization flight instructor. The night of 29 January, PAT-25 was conducting an annual proficiency and readiness test, or APART. And as part of that flight, was approved to operate at contingency locations associated with their directed mission. This has led to questions as to whether PAT-25 was transmitting automatic dependent surveillance broadcast out, or ADSB out. The specific status of both its operation and functionality is something that is under the investigation of the NTSB. The crew, however, was approved to operate with that capability off in accordance with Army policy. The aircraft transponder, however, was active with Mode 3 Alpha Charlie and Mode S when within the Class B airspace, and was emitting all the required information to allow air traffic services and traffic collision avoidance systems to detect and track the aircraft. Army policy does not permit transponder off operations in the national airspace. They do not permit transponder off operations. There is certainly no shortage of speculation on potential causes of the accident. I understand well the desire for answers. As the Director of Army Aviation and a senior Army aviator, there is nothing more important to me than the capability, proficiency, and safety of our air crews and those whom they transport and support in defense of this nation. And I'm also personally invested in the safety of our commercial aviation enterprise, as I live with an airline pilot, and her safety and the safety of her passengers is paramount to me as well, which is why it is essential that we see this investigation through to its fruition so we can have well-informed, fact-based conclusions to make desired change when needed. But where prudent, the Army is not waiting to take action. Immediately after the accident, the 12th Aviation Battalion paused all operations. They've only recently resumed flights and only outside the 7 nautical mile radius of DCA, with the exception of flights directly supporting the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and that remains true today. The Army continues to fully comply with all FAA restrictions on helicopter traffic over the Potomac River near DCA. The Army is actively participating, along with other military services and agencies, with an FAA-led working group to redesign the Route 4 helicopter corridor as recommended by the NTSB in its preliminary report. We've also issued interim guidance to elevate the approval authority to operate ADSB off. The Army is fully committed to a transparent and collaborative review of the events of 29 January and of all operations in the vicinity of DCA. We support any and all efforts to ensure a tragedy such as this never occurs again. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before this committee, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, General. Let me begin by asking witnesses questions, and then we'll alternate between Republicans and Democrats based upon time of arrival after the leadership of the committee has their opportunity to ask their questions. Chair Hamady, let me begin with you. First of all, I am interested in learning about the occurrences that have been described. I described in my opening statement about near misses and occurrences, TCAS advisories that occurred on numerous occasions over a long period of time. And what I hope you, and I will ask the administrator of the FAA these questions, but I'd like to know, what did people know? When did they know it? And why didn't someone do something about it? In asking you about this topic, is the information that is collected by the FAA, that's where these statistics that we've each mentioned, that's where they come from. Is that true?
There were different sources of information, some which was FAA, some of which are voluntary safety reporting programs.
And do those voluntary safety reporting programs, it's voluntary reporting to the FAA?
Yes.
So, I want
Yes.
to give you a chance
Yeah.
today. Yes. So the information that has been described here about those events over a long period of time is housed and utilized by you, but housed at the FAA.
I believe through a contractor, but yes.
And do you know at this point whether that information was reviewed in a regular manner? Have you investigated why information that seems so important didn't result in changes in policy, rules, or regulations?
I don't know why. What I will say is this was a data request, came from a data request from the NTSB. We made that with the FAA and received information from the Aviation Safety Action Program, ASAP, from ATSAP, which is air traffic control, from mandatory occurrence reports, and we also received information from FAA surveillance data from radar. But this was a request from us, and that resulted in our evaluation of that data and our urgent safety recommendations. It is, I don't know if the FAA pulled that data themselves at any point, and I'd have to defer to the acting administrator on that.
That information was so valuable, so important, so critical, that's the reason you asked for the immediate changes in safety regulations, true?
Yes, and there does seem to be an issue with identifying emerging trends, and looking at, there's a lot of data going to FAA, and taking that data and looking at trends and not specific issues, I think is something not only the IG has raised, but others have raised, even the acting administrator has raised, about having to do a better job with analyzing those trends. But it's key, because if we can get it after an accident occurs, what's key is getting it before and preventing it.
This is the wake-up call that suggests whether changes need to be made, true?
Correct.
Administrator, I'm interested in asking you the same series of questions. What did the FAA know prior to this accident? When did they know it? And why wasn't some action taken to encourage and in fact increase the safety, particularly at an airport like DCA and maybe others, and the proximity